Growing up in America, we always fantasized about this European lifestyle. I remember watching that scene in Lizzie McGuire movie. She was riding around Italy with Paolo. Inside of me, I'm just like, yes, that looks totally amazing. This is what dreams. Hey, don't judge me. I know you guys love that movie too. I think us as Americans, we think Europe is like the United States, where it's just a bunch of different states and they all speak European. My name is Wes. If you've seen my channel, you know that I'm brutally honest for the good and the bad. I've visited over 20 European countries and I've been living here in Poland for over a year. Today, we're going to talk about the key differences between living in America and Europe and why I personally think living in Europe is much better. I think the biggest notable difference is public transportation. I've always wondered why we haven't been able to figure out public transportation in the US. Here in Europe, these cities are significantly older than US is as a country, but they still figured out how to put trams and metros and bus lines that work really well. In the US, it's a car-based society for better or for worse. This is one of the reasons why I don't like going back to the US, because when I visit my family in Los Angeles, I can't really do anything unless my friends come and pick me up or my parents drive me somewhere. I mean, I have my driver's license, I can drive, but I don't have insurance. There's a lot of complications that come with that. If you want to do anything as simple as just going to the grocery store, you have to like get in your car and go to the supermarket. The infrastructure of public transportation is probably one of my favorite things about Europe because it allows you to get everywhere that you want without the need of a car. And something that's super underrated in my opinion is being able to go from the airport to the main city just by metro. You don't really get that in the US. You have to hire an Uber, which is extremely expensive. Here in Europe in general, people walk a lot more, people bike a lot more, people are on skates, people are just a lot more active here because the infrastructure allows it to happen. When you're in the US and you're trying to walk on the streets or the crosswalks, people look at you funny. People are like, what the F is this guy doing walking in the middle of the day? And we have such a big issue with obesity in the US. You don't realize how bad it is until you go to other countries and you realize this is how people are supposed to look like. We're not supposed to look like these people from WALL-E, right? It's not necessarily Americans' fault though, right? When you combine the poor infrastructure that doesn't allow us to walk, poor food quality, a very bad healthcare system that is so confusing.
We got a bill and then we realized that you guys didn't have our insurance, so we sent you the insurance and it looks like the bill went up. The first bill we got without the insurance was $600 and then the second one was almost $1,300.
A lot of people don't even want ambulances to come when they're sick because when the ambulance comes, you have to pay thousands or tens of thousands of dollars just for that ambulance. So you're in this perpetual state of like fear and anxiety all the time of not wanting to go to the hospital. Those medical bills can wreck you. And it seems like a lot of things in the US, including the university system, which we're gonna talk about, are purposely meant to enslave US citizens into putting them into debt forever. And this is just a problem that Europeans don't have to deal with. All of my friends that visit the US always say that when they eat the food, they never feel satisfied and they always gain weight. And I think that's because the food in the US is extremely processed. It's very difficult to get access to fresh, high quality produce or meat. These things are extremely expensive, so unless you can afford it, you have to buy cheap food. But in other countries around the world, fast food is usually more expensive than home-cooked local cuisine. Because in America, fast food is usually the cheap stuff. When you see European sizes, you're like, why is it so small? But then you realize because the ingredients are a lot better, you feel full a lot quicker. And because you're walking around a lot, you're not gaining weight, you're not having all these health issues. Food quality is better, overall life quality is a lot better. I highly recommend visiting Europe so you can see for yourself. One of the most common questions that I receive is what kind of phone plan should I get for my trip? Getting a roaming phone plan from the US can cost upwards of $200 per month, which to me is a total ripoff. That's why I'm just excited to share with you guys today's sponsor, Saily. So instead of having to do research to figure out what's the best network in any given country or having to buy a SIM card at the airport, which is usually overpriced, I can rest easy knowing that I can take care of that before even arriving to the country. Having an eSIM is great because you don't have to replace your current SIM card, nor do you have to pay exorbitant roaming fees. So how do you use Saily? First, you buy a plan for the country that you are visiting, pick out the duration that you need the plan for, make sure the eSIM is installed on your phone, and that's it. If you buy a plan from the website, then you need to install the app, but you can also buy plans directly from the app. Just make sure you activate it before arriving to your destination country. If you're interested in this game-changing technology, use code WHERE at checkout to get 15% off your order. Download the Saily app or go to saily.com/where to check it out. I think the US has a lot more of an independent mentality compared to most Europeans. Obviously, Europe is a big place, so this also varies by country, but in general, people tend to stay at home and living with their parents a lot more, especially in the Latin countries. Whereas in the US, the mentality is go and live your life, be independent. After you graduate college, you're out of the house and you gotta go live your own life. And I think that has some pros and cons, right? Because I've noticed that in general, Americans are a lot more ambitious and optimistic and hardworking than Europeans are. A lot of Europeans, honestly, are kind of lazy. So Europeans in general are a lot more social, a lot more community-based, and it's normal for people here to spend a lot of time with their friends and family. Whereas I think in the US, everybody's focused on their own thing and their job, and then you can see your friends when you can. Career is a lot more important in the US than it is here in Europe. And I think this is one of the US's pros, actually. If you're super ambitious, if you're super into business or you're entrepreneurial, there's no better place in the world than the US. The opportunity in the US is second to none. It's one of the only countries in the world where you can go from being a poor person from lower class to a wealthy person in one lifetime. In many other countries, especially here in Europe, that is not possible. Flip side to that is that in the US, you live a very good life if you're in the top 20%, but everybody else is struggling and trying to survive because of how expensive it is. Whereas here in Europe, I feel like most people are middle class, so you don't need to make a ton of money to be able to live a very good life here. If you guys are enjoying the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. Support me on Patreon or become a channel member if you want to support the channel. Europe to me is one of the most unique places in the world because you have so many small countries with their own language, their own cuisine, their own history, and they're all living together relatively in harmony. The problem with the US in general is that it's too big. You're trying to run a country with 50 different states that are almost like their own countries, but trying to apply one system to everything. Europe makes a lot more sense because it's like a lot smaller countries. The country runs things based on how the people want to run them. The less people that there are in a society, it's usually a lot safer. It's easier to manage. It's a lot easier to get things done, especially when it comes to politics. There's not as much bureaucracy. Europe has this mentality of cooperation because they have a bunch of different countries with different cultures, and they have to find a way to all coexist with each other, even though they're all completely different. Asia is similar to this. We all look the same, even though we may come from different countries. So that gives us a layer of familiarity between the countries and a mutual respect for, okay, that person's Japanese, that person's Korean. You know, they all have different ways of doing things. I think in America, it's really weird because we all look different, but our mentality is very close-minded because we don't really associate with other countries around the world the same way that other countries have to, right? Living here in Poland, you have to pay attention to what's going on in Ukraine because it's right next door. You have to pay attention to what's going on in the EU. Decisions that Germany makes also directly affects Poland. Whereas in the US, most people don't even know where Ukraine is, right? Because it's halfway across the world. We've never really had to face war and conflict the same way Europeans have. If you think about it, World War II was less than 100 years ago, and that destroyed a lot of Europe. I wouldn't say that Americans are not as intelligent. Americans have a lot more of a simple way of viewing the world. Whereas people here in Europe, most people for Erasmus, they'll study in other countries. Most people here in Europe speak 2, 3, 4 languages, right? That's very common. Whereas in the US, most people only speak one. And even the children of immigrants, a lot of them don't even speak their parents' language. And this is very important because when you speak multiple languages, you get access to different ways of thinking. The way that the language is set up is very similar to the thinking of that society. I'm gonna make a video on that maybe in the future. It just gives you an appreciation for other ways of life. Whereas if you only speak English and you expect everybody else to speak English, let's face it, English is the universal language, then you have this mentality that I don't need to learn other ways of thinking. People have to comply with my way of thinking. And I think that's the American way in a lot of ways. And I think historically with foreign policy and all those things, that's how America has acted towards the rest of the world. I also really like living in a society without guns. I used to be pretty pro-gun back in the day when I was going through my super conservative phase. But after living in countries where guns are illegal, I feel a lot safer in this environment. You can never take guns away from Americans. It's just too deeply embedded in our culture. People can make the argument that knife crime, for example, in a place like the UK is really, really bad. At least with a knife, you can run away. If somebody pulls a gun on you, that's pretty much game over for you. The guns in the US gives a lot of Americans Americans this God mentality. Anybody can feel like they're better than other people just because they have a gun. Whereas if you live in a place without guns, if you get in a bad situation, you're forced to physically fight your way out. I think that changes people's mentalities and how they approach conflict. I think university in the US is a scam, to be completely honest. I think a lot of universities used to be about teaching people how to think. Now a lot of universities is about teaching people what to think. It's not worth the price anymore. The way that uni has been sold to American kids, you're 18 years old, you take out a loan as big as a house sometimes, and this is supposed to promise us a good job in the future. But now that I'm older, I've seen that that's not true at all. To be honest, all of my friends that are the wealthiest either dropped out or didn't go to college. And I really think it's effed up. American society puts their citizens in debt from such an early age and essentially makes them like into slaves. You have to get a job right away in order to pay off your loans. And these are the only loans that don't go away. And you come here to Europe and you ask people, oh, how much are you paying for uni for the year? Either it's free or they're like, oh, we pay like 2,000 euros a semester or 2,000 euros a year. And I hear that and I'm like, wait, this, what? In America, the average cost of tuition is like $40,000, $50,000. That's a whole year's salary just for 1 year of uni. To me, it's totally a scam. I didn't even really learn anything in uni. All the things that I learned about business, I learned by owning my own restaurant. A lot of people just go to uni just to party and have a good time and don't really care about classes. This culture also exists here in Europe, right? So that's not just with the US. And I think it's wild. If you're 18 years old, we won't give them $10,000 so they can open up their own business, but we're gonna give them $50,000 or $100,000 of student debt just so they can go to uni. One of the biggest privileges that Europeans have is their ease of travel. They can go to a completely different country, round trip like less than 100 euros. In the US, just a flight from like California to Arizona costs like $200-$300. And if we want to go to Europe, if we want to go to Asia, it's so far, so the plane tickets are very expensive. And I think this is the biggest reason why Europeans are so cultured, just because they see a lot of the world and they're more educated and aware of different cultures and history. Something I really like about Europe in general is I find that they're not very materialistic. Most people here are in the middle class. People just don't care about things that much, right? The apartments are not as big. If you look at how big American houses is and you come to Europe, a lot of people are like, these houses are so small. But then the way that I see it is like, American houses are just unnecessarily big. Do we really need all of that space? Especially having to clean big houses is just such a pain in the butt. And here I think Europeans just have a better view on like work-life balance. Something as simple as just going down to the river, sitting down, hanging out with your friends with a beer or two. It's cheap, it's fun. It does feel like in the US we have this keeping up with the Joneses mentality where we have to get the next car and the latest iPhone. American consumerism is kind of legendary all around the world. European fashion is some of the nicest in the world. Here in Poland, I'm gonna be honest, not so much. But in general, especially in the Western European countries, and I would even say Scandinavia, people really know how to dress. When other people care about how they dress and how they present themselves, it makes me also care about how I present myself. And one big difference that I've noticed is that Europeans like to smoke. It's kind of a really big issue, I think. I think smoking is pretty disgusting, especially when women smoke. In America, I think we have an issue now with vapes, actually. And a lot of countries have legalized marijuana, so there's a lot of people that smoke weed as well. It's kind of like a running joke where Europeans for breakfast they'll have like a coffee and a cigarette. Overall, I think life in Europe is significantly better than it is in the US. I don't need to be super rich. I just want to make a good living, own my house, and raise my family for the rest of my life. I think Europe is the best place to do that. Support me on Patreon or become a channel member if you want to support the channel. I highly recommend that you guys watch this video next. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.